Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod and this is Star Wars 7x7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy, and thank you so much for joining me for it. So this episode is being recorded prior to the release of the 3-episode season premiere of Bad Batch Season 3, so there are no spoilers in this episode. This is one of our last burning question situations, and we're going to talk about how the Bad Batch could, would, should end. Now, I think the one thing, like the biggest thing of all, is that the series needs to end on some kind of win for the Bad Batch. So if you think about the endings of the first 2 seasons, we talked about this a bit on yesterday's episode, but Bad Batch Season 1 ends with the destruction of the cities on Kamino, and in particular Topoka City, and the destruction of all of the cloning facilities and whatnot on Kamino, right? And the Bad Batch barely survives that. In Season 2, the ending happens with Tech dying and Omega getting captured by the bad guys. And I'm not saying that, it's a bummer that these seasons ended that way. I mean, that's what you do. You create these cliffhangers for these various seasons and whatnot. But this is no longer a cliffhanger situation. We are in the final season of the Bad Batch. So the Batch desperately needs a win, and a big win, something that will make all of their efforts over the last couple of seasons be, not just worthwhile, but add up to something significant. A second thing that jumps out to me, just in terms of like the whole of the series, is that Crosshair needs to get his redemption arc completed, right? He went from being all in on the Empire to being disillusioned by the Empire. Now in Season 3, he needs the arc where he goes to the other side and he starts helping the Bad Batch again, which starts by helping Omega, of course, and that comes to a third thing in the season. We know that Omega has to get out of the hands of the Empire by the end of the season. That much is clear. But what happens to her and Crosshair and the rest of the Bad Batch after they deal with the Empire? Well, that's a big open question. Are they just going to go off into the sunset and retire quietly, or are they going to get involved in other things like joining up with Rex and his nascent rebellious activities? It strikes me that the latter is probably where things are going to go. I mean, if anybody deserves to be able to, put down their weapons and go live on a beach in the middle of nowhere and just relax for the rest of their days, it is absolutely the Bad Batch. But that's sort of the blessing and the curse to their particular set of skills, is that there's definitely going to be a need for them and a lot of people who will need them. So maybe ultimately an I need a vacation kind of moment, but with the knowledge that they are going to be wading back into the fray at some point, and those will be other stories that can be told somewhere down the line. Now, circling back around to the idea about the Bad Batch needing a big win, on the other side of that equation is the fact that somebody needs to pay for their actions on the side of the Empire. I think the prime candidate for that is Dr. Royce Hemlock. We talked about him yesterday in terms of all the characters who might live or die at the end of Season 3. I think he is one of the top tier candidates for being a character who doesn't survive the end of the season. We know Palpatine is not going to suffer for this in any significant way. Hemlock is the biggest bad guy character established in the Bad Batch who could potentially have any kind of fall. And so for the season to end with a big win for the Bad Batch, for it to be significant, it would have to be Hemlock that would suffer for it. And related to that, and this occurred to me in thinking also about the Alphabet Squadron trilogy by Alexander Freed, one of the people running Shadow Wing in the Empire, like his goal was to erase all the records of anybody in the Empire, with the thought that he was giving the members of the Empire a fresh start, that they could succeed or fail based on their own merits, but that maybe there were a lot of people in the Empire who were just doing their jobs and weren't necessarily inherently evil and shouldn't be treated that way by the New Republic. You can get into arguments about that, but for the purposes of our discussion, we can talk about the idea that the efforts going on at Mount Tantus and all of those cloning activities, that you could get rid of all of that in a similar fashion. You could have the Bad Batch look at it and say, yeah, we need to get rid of whatever cloning activities they're doing. We can't let them continue on in this fashion. We can't let them abuse what the Kaminoans did. And if you presume that all record keeping about clones has been transferred from Kamino to Mount Tantus, then you can also imagine a scenario where the destruction of Mount Tantus is also equivalent to the destruction of all records about clones. And so any clones that are out on the run, there would be no records of them anymore. And so that would help them blend into the rest of society. So those are my thoughts about how I think the final season of the Bad Batch will ultimately end. I would love to hear your ideas as well. If you're catching this on YouTube, comments are right there. If you're catching this on Spotify, hit up the Q&A section. And if you're catching it anywhere else, then just head over to the blog post for this show's episode at sw7x7.com and leave a comment there. And that is going to do it for this episode of the show. We're going to start talking about the actual episodes on tomorrow's episode. But for now, I just want to say thank you so much for joining me for this episode as always. If you have not done so yet, please consider rating and reviewing the podcast on your favorite app, hitting the like, subscribe, follow button, join button, whatever they call it on your favorite app, and sharing the show with other Star Wars friends that you know. And I hope you'll even consider going one step further and support the production of this show as we approach our 10th anniversary by going to patreon.com/SW7X7. And may the Force be with you wherever in the world you may be.
7x7 is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited, or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyrighted by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.